Whenever I hear the word Botox, I picture something like this. Now, I did a little bit of research and found out that in World War II, the US actually tried to weaponize Botox. So how did it go from a biological weapon to one of the most used substances in the cosmetic industry? But first, we have to define Botox. What is Botox?
So Botox is a neurotoxin made by this rod-shaped bacteria called Botulinum. It sounds like a Harry Potter spell, but anyways, it's mainly found in anaerobic environments, meaning places with little to no oxygen, such as soil and bodies of water.
There's different types of this bacteria, from A all the way to F, each producing its own toxin.
So the botulinum neurotoxin is extremely dangerous, just because if that toxin goes into your body, you get a disease known as botulism. That can cause difficulty breathing, swallowing, speaking, facial weakness, paralysis, and even death. It typically spreads through contaminated food or water, but there's also these that you can look up if you're actually really paranoid, but we're not going to focus on that.
When I looked it up, there's like less than 1,000 cases per year in the US, so the odds of you actually dying from it are super low, but never zero.
So wait, if it's actually that dangerous, then how come people use it in cosmetic surgery? That makes no sense, right?
In order to answer that question, we have to get in a time machine and go back to the origin of Botox. Now, there's a whole bunch of boring stuff, so here's like the main highlights.
In the early 1800s, Europe was going through a bit of a rough patch, trying to recover from the Napoleonic Wars. Poverty hit everyone pretty hard, and people were eating pork products, even though it was common knowledge at the time that eating pork could easily get you sick, just because back then they didn't really have a good way of preparing it and cleaning it. Countries like Germany, who were famous for their sausages, got hit the hardest with the infamous sausage disease, which we know today as botulism. That's actually where botulism got its name, botulus being Latin for sausage. And it got so bad that a German doctor named Justinus Kerner began to research the mysterious pork disease. He ran sausage tests and discovered that the sausages ran risk of becoming poisonous even without exposure to the air. After studying how the disease affected the human body, he theorized that if isolated, parts of the poison could be used to paralyze muscle spasms. Fast forward 70 years, and a Belgian bacteriologist named Emile Pierre Marie van Ingerman was studying an incident at a funeral dinner party in which smoked and pickled ham caused 37 people to get sick. They displayed the same symptoms such as eyelid spasms, impaired vision, speech disorder, asphyxia, and even death within a couple of days. And remember Justinus Kerner? That German doctor and his studies on botulism led Emile to dive deeper into understanding the poison. Emile then ran a few tests and had a few major breakthroughs. Number one being that the bacteria actually made the toxin. It wasn't toxic itself. Number two being that some animals like donkeys were immune to its effects for whatever reason. And the third being that heating and salting food could stop the bacteria from actually making that toxin. But botulism was still a problem even in the early 1900s. So companies like the Dole Food Company helped develop food canning methods to preserve the food better. Quick side note, I made a video on how they made pineapples affordable. Back then, they used to cost $8,000. I'll link that video in the description. So back to the story. Since people were so skeptical and eating out of cans was weird, still, it wasn't until post-Civil War that this food packaging method got popular. At this point, the toxin had been studied and written about enough for some countries to perk up their ears and say, oh look, there's a dangerous new substance. We should weaponize it.
Germany tried to weaponize it in World War II, but they failed. So of course, in true American fashion, United States comes in and then begins researching potential biological weapons, because of course we gotta be number one in everything. America! So they come up with a plan, and the plan being they're gonna hire Chinese prostitutes to murder high-ranking Japanese officers by grabbing a little bit of that botulinum toxin in gelatin form, like in a capsule, and slipping it into their food or drink.
They made a whole bunch of capsules to test out their plan, but of course, as irony would have it, they tried it on one of the few animals that was allegedly immune to the toxin, which was donkeys. Even though the botulinum toxin is considered one of the most poisonous substances in the world, it's actually a pretty bad choice for a biological weapon, and here's why. It had to be ingested in enough quantity, and mortality rates vary too much. Secondly, the toxin can be inactivated quickly by standard water sanitation. Third, it's not really contagious. And the last one, you can treat it with a botulinum antitoxin.
Then the US Academy of Sciences starts this lab in Fort Detrick, and basically the whole purpose of the lab is just to study dangerous bacteria and toxins that could potentially become weapons for war. But in 1972, President Nixon signs this treaty that basically says, hey, let's not develop these biological weapons because it's probably not a good idea for anybody involved. So to this day, there's just a handful of countries that haven't signed and ratified it yet.
Although Fort Detrick was formally closed, the University of Wisconsin continued the research of botulinum and other foodborne toxins for medicinal use. By 1979, they had stacked up on enough botulinum toxin A batches that had been FDA approved, so they began human trials. Fast forward to 1991, a pharmaceutical company named Allergen Incorporated bought several of those botulinum toxin A batches and also the research findings. Since botulinum toxin A was not really marketable or brandable, they renamed the toxin to Botox.
Hey, well, anyways, what does Botox actually do? Actually, a handful of pretty useful things, I would say.
It's used in ophthalmology to treat things like blepharospasm, strabismus, which I can barely say. In neurology, botulinum toxins A and B are used to treat torticollis, almost all forms of dystonias, spasticity, tremors, vocal disorders, cerebral palsy. But the bigger one being in dermatology, because in 1987, Dr. 𝐁𝐨𝐿 noticed that frown lines disappeared after using the botulinum toxin A for this condition called blepharospasm. Still can't say it. So she had an aha moment and shared that information with her husband Alistair, who happened to be a dermatologist. Little did they know they had discovered something that would change the cosmetic enhancement procedure industry forever.
So today there's millions of people every single year getting a shot of Botox to look like a plastic lizard. It treats anything from crow's feet to wrinkles to a whole bunch of other stuff. This little toxin has had a crazy ass journey. I mean, from a potential biological weapon all the way to making people look like ducks. I will say one of the things that Botox will not fix is your parents' divorce. If you did like the video, make sure to like and subscribe. I make videos on weird stories like this every single week. See you soon. Love you like a headache.